Hi, I'm Michael Wargo, team pilot with Precision Aerobatics and Hobby King. I've had a few people request this video, and I don't know who it will help and who it won't help, but I'd love to be transparent about how I do things, how I set the planes up. There are guides everywhere for how I actually set all of my aircraft up, so that isn't very hard to find. I will put a link to it in my at the bottom of this video. But today I'm going to show you my switch selection and how exactly I set this up and where I position everything. So let's take a look. Okay, well basically I have a few different switch setups, and I will show you my pattern, my 3D, and my jet setups. Warbirds are similar to the jets. But for right now, here's my switch positioning. If I'm flying a 3D aircraft, I don't do anything with the gear. If for any reason I should have a gyro, which I don't on any of my 3D planes, but I set the gyro up here in 3 positions on this switch. I set up my flight modes like this. I feel like this is the easiest one to flip. I put a little rubber thing on here to make it a little easier to identify. So that's that switch for me. I set this switch as my throttle kill rather than this one. Most people use this switch. The reason I don't, and if I do, I would set up as on. And the reason I do that is I have on more than one occasion, because I hold the radio up here, I've accidentally kind of flipped the switch and turned the motor off. So this one here I think is just, you know, it's where I'll never hit it accidentally, and I set this as the on position, and that is naturally off because I select all the switches up as off. This flight mode switch is set to be able to control all of them at once. On my 3D planes, I set at least 4 rates. Some of the 3D planes that have really exaggerated throws, AJ Aircraft, Extreme Flight, that are getting 60 degree of elevator, I like to keep that as a tumbling rate. So I set this for 3 rates. I have a 3D rate, I have a snap rate, and here is my low rate that I described in my my guides. Now, on one particular model like the Addiction, and some of the other models that have super fast ailerons, I will eliminate my my low rate and make a rolling rate, which is slightly slower ailerons, a little less rudder and elevator, and I do that with my Addiction along with a few other 3D planes. Okay, when I set up the flight mode switch, I set this rate to be a tumbling rate. That rate can only be active if I'm already on 3D rates, so that adds a little extra elevator, because to be honest with you, 60 degrees of elevator, if you want a 3D, is a little silly. Just normally, if I'm doing 3D and I want a rolling harrier, I want a hover, I want a harrier, I want to do things like that, 45 degrees is all you need. But sometimes for tumbling and elevators and things like that, that little bit of extra elevator really helps. So I set my 4th rate over there. Most of you know that I have a mix that I've showed you in my videos that is kind of a spoiler-on mix, which makes my ailerons go up and down with the elevator, and I set it on this switch right here. Anyway, that's my setup for 3D planes. Okay, this is my setup for jets. Obviously I do the sticks the exact same way, but here's my switch setup. Here is the gyro, which I do use on my jets. And I have voice control telling me what it is, you know, low gyro, high gyro, that kind of thing. That makes it a little easier. I have a nice big knob on my flap switch because sometimes it's just a little easier to grab it when you know exactly what you're reaching for. So this is my flap switch, first, second level flaps. people like my friend Tom, for instance, uses this slider for flaps and is gradual. I'm much more comfortable setting takeoff and landing flaps. There is great wisdom in having variable flaps. I just feel that maybe it's not as consistent, but for instance, Tom flies 777s, and depending on the wind, they set the flaps at different levels all the time. So in his opinion, there's a bit more control, which he's absolutely right, and it's just a matter of taste. So I have a 3-position switch, and that's what I do. Not saying I'm right or wrong, that's just what I do. As always, my rates are over here. I do not have separate rates for aileron, elevator, and rudder. I think it's silly to have so many different setups. So I only have 3 rates for my jets: high, like a medium rate that has faster ailerons, and a low rate for really high speed. It's important that you have a nice low rate for really high speed, because obviously when the plane is going that fast, you just don't need too much input. I always leave my gear on this switch A. For me, it's just the most convenient. I find it very easy to click these switches. Here's the switch I use for smoke. Smoke on, smoke off. I do use a mix with the throttle to make sure the smoke goes off if the throttle goes to 0. I use this slider for brakes, and of course this is proportional. So as I'm landing, I do have a mix with the elevator. Down elevator gives me brakes as well, but I generally apply the brakes here. That way I can apply a little bit if I'm on concrete to land with them preloaded a little bit. But anyway, this is where I use my brakes. I don't really find this much different using brakes over here, but since I'm on the throttle over here, I find this switch just a bit more convenient. Anyway, that's all the switching I do for jets. There's no special throttle kill or anything. I set the switch to have only one level of trim. That's another thing that I do with my jets. Okay, this is my setup for pattern planes, and this is the switches that I click for pattern. I have 4 rates for my pattern planes. I have a high rate over here that not only is high rates for taking off and landing, or maybe doing something special, but it also turns off the 0 throttle down elevator, because I take off and land with that, and my 0 throttle down elevator mix is switched off with that switch when it's all the way up. Because if I'm in a low rate and it's automatically, as soon as I go 0 throttle, it noses down a little bit, there's obviously a little danger in that. So I have my low rates. I have what you'll see in my guides is a snap rate, which is fast ailerons and low everything else. My high rate or 3D rate. And I also have a number 4 rate that increases my rudder in case I need it for stall turns or wind conditions or anything like that. When I flip this, I go into flight mode 4, but it's only active when I am on the middle rate here, because it's just an accentuated rate that is very similar to my middle rate. They're almost identical. Flight mode 2. There are no other things that you should know about except my throttle kill is over here. Again, that's throttle on. This is throttle off. So really, when I'm flying pattern, I'm just switching between these. Obviously, I have no gyro in my pattern plane, and again, I always do the same thing with the sticks. I pinch and use my thumb for the left hand. Generally, I use my thumb only on my left stick for my rudder and throttle. For me, it's easier to blip the throttle like this. On the right, I basically pinch with my thumb on the top lower part. Especially if I'm inverted, if this finger is on the bottom, I find it very difficult to make a mistake because I'm only pushing. I can't pull from that position. But I do have this finger up on top, And I find it very easy to control throughout with this particular pinching method that I use. My hands tend to shake a little bit, always, been like that forever. So this is also a little way to help keep it a little, extra steady.